placement, all these things. So they're very aware that just putting images in your environment is a way of manipulating your taste and desire, just from letting you know that this thing called Coca-Cola exists. So if you're in a village somewhere, you've never heard of anything called Coca-Cola, you can't desire it. You can't even want, oh, I need some Coke right now, right? So they need to make sure that, one, you know that it exists, and then two, you need to make it look like, oh, beautiful people drink this thing. Oh, look, smiling, happy people drink this thing. You understand? So all of this goes into creating taste and desire. So the process of de-whitenization, again, is to divest oneself. One, to even be conscious that that's what's going on. And then two, to make conscientious steps to say, all right, what are my needs and then what are my wants? Right? What do I actually need to live and what has been created in me in order to enrich my enemy? Understand? So people don't just wake up and say naturally, oh, let me make my hair straight. There's a process that creates this thing that, oh, that's what's good, right? People don't just wake up. Like, human beings have been on the planet, like the oldest fossils that have been found near Lake Chad, and they date to 7 million years ago.
Where is
Chad? So people for 7 million years were not saying, you know what, I need my hair to be straight. That is a very recent phenomenon that, oh, so then we go into, well, what did that? Usually it's entertainment, which is the most insidious way of doing it, because as we're laughing and clapping and ha 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 ha, that we're getting images that actually shape our behavior, right? So all of that is there. There's a lot of work on by Dr. Amos Wilson. You can find talks of his online where he goes into how behavior can be shaped, and he gives a couple of examples. Go ahead. Yeah.
Did he write something about the psychology of black?
Yeah. Developmental psychology of black children, awakening the natural genius of black children, blueprint for black power, falsification of African consciousness. What's that? I'm going to say African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. He has quite a few. Those are the main ones I can think of right now. Black on black violence. That's black self-annihilation in service of white domination.
I should be hearing about him more.
Yeah. So he passed away in the 90s, but a lot of his videos are online, and his books are still available. So he goes into the ways and means that are used in order to shape people's consciousness. One of those is, well, he gives the example of the Skinner box. So if you study psychology, you learn about B.F. Skinner. And he goes into how what this white scientist did was that he would shape the behavior of rats, right? So he put them into a box, and for one, he gave them all the food that they would need. They had space, they had, little things to run on, everything. And then for another one, they were all crammed in together. They had very little food, very little water, so forth and so on. And it got to the point where they could predict the exact minute where the fight is going to break out amongst them, right? So the ones that have abundance, they don't have any problem, but the ones who are all crammed in. So his point is that that's what you see in the so-called projects, that they've just taken the Skinner box and said, this is the Skinner box. Because a lot of the black people in the Great Migration to the north, they went up to the north for jobs, World War II time. But then once the white folks came back, they said, we don't need you anymore. So we're going to put you into these projects. No resources, right? It's all of the exact same thing. No food, no water, no resources, no jobs. However, we may throw some drugs in there. There are no cocoa farms in the projects, but somehow crack gets there. There are no machine gun factories made by black people in the projects, but somehow all these guns get there. So there's a good documentary called Crack the CIA that goes into the role of the CIA in terms of flying in, crack into Arkansas. That was when Clinton was the governor there. Bill Clinton.
I didn't know anything from.
Yeah, Arkansas. He was governor of Arkansas. Yeah, so that's one is shaping consciousness that way. Another thing that Skinner did was that he would have uh, these levers where if the rat pressed the lever 2 times, then it would get fed. If it pressed it 1 time, it wouldn't get fed. So he would do all these manipulations in order to shape the consciousness of the rat to get it to do things that normal rats would never ever do, but they are being conditioned in order to do certain things in order to get rewards and to not be punished, right?
Right.
So that's how you shape an environment in order to shape the consciousness, and this is essentially what goes on in the U.S. and throughout the world, as you can see here in Ghana, that it goes on here as well. Also Pavlov, where you're familiar. So ring a bell, the dog starts salivating because it knows this is an association. Bell, food, I hear the bell, oh, food is coming. So you can shape consciousness like that, and that's what happens to human beings, black people specifically, because it's whites who are treating us as the Pavlov's dog. It's the whites who are treating us as the rats. Now, when you go to some of the dungeons here, there's one on the one side that they now call Elmina, that when you go into the right, and then you go inside, there's the male dungeon. And when you look up, you'll see that there's a trap door at the top. Now, they stopped mentioning this trap door in the tours that they give now, but back in the 90s, they would say that the trap door was there so that once the place was filled with, sometimes 300, 400, 500 African males, that's a male dungeon there on that side, that what the Portuguese would do is they would take like 1 loaf of bread and then throw it in there.
Oh, wow.
And that was their entertainment. They didn't have cable, so they said, yeah, let's, do this. So they throw in a loaf of bread. So these people who previously were eating around the same dish, they were sharing, had all these, values and whatever, that they put them into a resourceless environment, much like Skinner did later, and then they could predict when the fight is going to break out over these scarce resources, right? And essentially what that is it's a similar process. What whites are doing is that they are inflicting on African people a similar process to what they went through over tens of thousands of years in Eurasia. So there you have the warm glaciation period. You have this long period of time where it's snow, ice, glaciers, very few resources. So when you're in an environment like that, then you come to this idea of only the strong survive. Survival of the fittest, might makes right. There's only so many resources, so if I'm strong enough to take my club and bash your head in, then I get to eat your children, right? That type of deal. So, all the things that they tell you in terms of those proverbs of white folks, it says a lot about where they come from. And this was recognized by African people as far back as over 4,000 years ago. There's a text called The Instructions to Mary Carre, where it says, "Lo, the miserable Asiatic, he is wretched because of the place he's in, short of water, bare of wood. His paths are many and difficult because of mountains. He does not announce the day of combat. He is like a crocodile on its shore. He is like a thief that darts about in the group." So it like goes in, but the beginning part is the part that basically ascribes this behavior to the environment that they're in, whether it's desert, like the Arabs, or the other Eurasians in more icy environments, that they're in places where there is not this abundance. So once you are in a place without resources, then you start to struggle over whatever is there. And when that happens to you over the course of tens of thousands of years, there's very much a shift in terms of who you are. So now when you can understand that, that type of deprived environment, when they come in contact with anyone else, then they behave just like how they did their caveman, Neanderthal, predecessors did. So if you look at every single place on the planet that they ever set foot, without one single exception, they committed genocide, they raped, they plundered, they committed biological warfare, smallpox blankets, Lutririta, what they now call Tasmania. They exterminated every single full-blooded person, African person. They look blacker than any continental African you will ever see. And they still have pictures from the early 1900s. Truganini, Trugani, that's the last of them. You can see like pictures of her. from that time, that they exterminated all of them to the point where now there are no more full-blooded Tasmanians. The only ones who they allowed to survive were the products of rape, because they would take the women, they would cut the heads off of their husband and make the women wear them as necklaces as they drugged them in to rape them. They would take the babies and they would have contests where they would bury the baby all the way up to their neck, and then they would take their boots and see who can kick the baby's head off the furthest. These are white folks, right? In Australia, same thing, extermination, and then they tried to rape the women to the point where they wanted that whole population to not exist by means of rape. They figured that if you keep having the indigenous blood in them, generation after generation, eventually they will go out of existence that way. So also killing directly. The very first Holocaust was Germany against the people of Namibia, the Herero and the Nama people. There's a good book that I actually just read not too long ago called The Kaiser's Holocaust, Germany's Forgotten Genocide. And basically all the things that they later did to the so-called Jews, they had done all of those things, concentration camps, all of those, to the indigenous people of what's now Namibia, namely the Herero people, the Nama people, the extermination order of von Trotha, all these things. There was actually a person who's from Namibia who put me onto that book. I already knew about the story, but that book goes very much into detail, and it connects the unbroken link from all of those thoughts that were in the 1800s, Darwinism, social Darwinism, so forth and so on. Yeah, it's good that those people are wiped out because they're genetically unfit, eugenics, all those types of ideas, that there's an unbroken line. Now the problem that white folks have with Hitler is that he decided to take the next logical step and apply that internally to other white folks, right? They don't have a problem that they were doing that against black people. It's just, no, we made an agreement, only do that to everybody else, don't do that to white folks, right? So Leopold killed over 10 million Africans in the Congo, right? If we list examples of whites committing genocide, we'll be here all day. But you never hear about, oh, that person is a real Leopold. They'll say, oh, that's a modern day Hitler. They don't say that's a modern day Leopold because they don't have a problem with Leopold. They have a problem with Hitler because he applied that to other white folks, right? They don't say, oh, that's a real Cecil Rhodes, right? This killer, this rapacious killer. They don't say that's a real Christopher Columbus, right? So that tells you, a lot. So yeah, that's one, just in terms of shaping consciousness. So all of this goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of de-whitenization. Now Amos Wilson, he gives another talk where he goes into spirit possession and multiple personality disorder. So in terms of multiple personality disorder, he's reading different articles. And in one of the articles it talks about a boy named Timmy. And, when Timmy drinks orange juice, nothing happens. But when the other personality is in him, drinks orange juice, then hives break out. Like a physiological reaction to this thing that formerly there's no problem. So that is to say, depending on what personality is inside, it can have an impact on the host body, right? And this is essentially the same thing that's discussed with spirit possession. And the analogy he makes and what makes it relevant to black people, African people throughout the world, is that he essentially says that this is what is going on with us, basically just like spirit possession, just like multiple personality disorder, in the sense that we have a little white agent that's implanted inside of us that wants what it wants. It doesn't care whether it hurts the host body or not. It just wants Jordans. It just wants this flat screen TV. It just wants these phones. It just wants them clothes. Just want to live that house. It just wants that car. All those types of things. So it's the exact same analogous process of when you have this little white something inside of you. It wants what it wants, whether it's good for black people as a whole or not. It just wants what it wants, whether it's good for you individually or not. So whether that's drugs, whether that's the food, the fast food, all this garbage, right? And when I say drugs, not only illegal drugs, the medical drugs, all those things that people also get addicted to. So, it's a very insightful and poignant way of understanding what actually is going on with us. So the de-whitenization is aimed at actually looking at this little white entity that's implanted in us through religion, because here's an imaginary white boy you got to pray to every day, through miseducation, right? They tell you, oh, these people are heroes, and they have to go and shoot those savages who are the indigenous people whose land that they're stealing, right? So anytime anyone is on U.S. soil, that's stolen land. So your house is on stolen land, your job is on stolen land, the road you drive on is stolen land, every single square inch of that place is stolen land, apart from maybe reservations. And even those, the people who are in that reservation may not have come from that land, right? So that's that. So yeah, de-whitenization is something that's definitely a priority because it has practical effects in terms of economic warfare. That is to say, instead of supporting your enemy and doing what this little white agent that's implanted inside of us tells us to do, we say, no, I don't want those things, right? And there are various ways that we can do that just in terms of what we choose to wear on a day-to-day basis, in terms of what types of technology that we will go in for and what we won't go in for. So this is a phone KTA, Kwesi Chumampopo, and it's an African who made a phone, so I made a conscientious decision.
Yeah, and so the people back home think, we don't make nothing.
So let me show you the car company here in Ghana as well. And I actually just did an interview for their TV show last week. And it's supposed to be bringing me the recording. It was in Shilani. So this is Black Inventions Live On. And it shows the names, the patent numbers, that there are enough black inventions that could fill an entire city.
Oh, okay.
And there's a good book called Black Inventions, Black Inventors, Crafting Over 200 Years of Success. And the author documents over 11,000 inventions by black people, patented, documented, named, everything across the entire world. So like Black History Month, we'll learn about those in the U.S., but this goes into black people who were in Australia, black people who were living in Germany, black people who were living in China, black people in Brazil, Caribbean islands, everywhere. So 11,000 inventions from 1900 to 2007. And of course, many more since then. Fiber optic cables. It was actually by a Ghanaian named Thomas Mensah. The personal computer, Dr. Mark Dean, led the research team and has the majority of the patents on. So led, not like he was part of it too, like, he led the research team that invented the personal computer, right?
Oh, okay.
That's Dr. Mark Dean. We can go through the list of, quite a few of them.
Well, the thing is like, for me, I see all these things today, but I'm kind of feeling like it's ridiculous that I still come here and it's like, oh, do they know how to build anything? Do they know how to, get internet orders? Oh, we don't know how to do, electricity for the whole street. So it's like, well, where, if I can
And a Ghanaian invented the internet that you're using, the technology you're using. But Ghanaians here they've never heard his name because it's not part of the curriculum. It's not part of the curriculum.
So then when we go down and talk,
They learn about Napoleon, they learn about Einstein, they learn about Queen Victoria, they learn about Shakespeare. They read Shakespeare here, but they don't learn about black people. It's not part of the curriculum.
See, the other thing is I'm also trying to figure out, like, what part of the de-whiteness thing is, like, what career path you're taking. So, like, right now, I'm at a point where I'm still figuring out what I want to do, and people have a lot of ideas for what I should do. But when I think about the average track, it's like you get your degree for what? Even people I talk to, the main reason behind getting these degrees or any career is for money, for your staying your job, your family, and all that. But to me, that just feeds back into whiteness. So then we're hearing all these things about even what's going on in Ghana as far as people not knowing this information. every single place, what is it that you guys need? But I'm just not sure if that's the way to do things, because even if we go to the Minister of Education, for instance,
Mhm.
and we ask him what do you need, he says we need literacy, the kids need to know how to read, so we need books. And so, but it's like, well, when you say they need those things, what is your end? When you're trying to, I just don't know what the goals are, even for the heads that we talk to. If they're not sharing this information with their own people, then
Mhm.
I, as an outsider, how can I really help?
Yeah, and I had a colleague who, the former director of African Studies, shared with me that they realized the problem with the books, with the curriculum, so forth and so on. So they wrote a set of books. However, when they tried to get it into the Ghana Education Service, a bribe was demanded. That if you don't pay, then your books aren't going to get out there. Because you're going to get rich off a book being in all these schools, so where's our cut? So, that gives you just a little bit of a sense because, and the problem isn't the corruption, that is the end result of a process that created corrupt people. So most people look at corruption as though that's the cause of problems. That's what everybody's going to say because they themselves cannot think. They're not taught to think.
Yeah.
So the corruption, no one asks the question of what causes the corruption. So people just assume, well, black people, they've always been corrupt. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA.
Yeah,
That's
it
people will
doesn't
say
make
that.
sense. I'm like, how you be corrupt to your own people?
Yeah.
Your own man?
So all of these miseducation things, the fact that people don't know any of these things, and then what people do know, that is the factory that creates corrupt people. You have people who think that we're worthless, we're useless, we've never done anything, we were swinging on trees before white folks got here. So the best I could do is be like a white person and, get money like white folks.
Right.
If I can drive in a car just like that white man, then I become, worth something. And then it becomes a thing of just the ends justify the means. So all of these things are the calculated. It's not like it just happened that way. These things that people complain about are the calculated end result of a process to create corrupt people. So if anyone goes through that and ends up not corrupt, they're the exception to the rule. It's like, wow, what happened to you? What was going on? Because it's designed to create everything that we see here that we complain about.
So then, if I look up something like fiber optics on the internet, who invented fiber optics, I'm not going to find.
Yes, you will.
Really?
Yes, you will. You'll see him being interviewed by BBC and CNN, and everybody in the world knows it except for black people. You'll look at video interviews of Dr. Thomas Mensah. He's been given multiple awards all throughout the world. Everybody knows him except for his own people.
Okay, so then we shouldn't have no problem.
I'm really just not understanding. I guess it's like I keep saying, like, what do you do with all this information? But how do you figure out where your own road is? Because even if I work at a school system in DeKalb County, for instance, it's still like I don't know.
Yeah, I gave a talk called, you can find it online too, Divest from America, Invest in Africa to Make Africa Great Again. That's the name of the talk. Divest from America. That's America spelled with 3 Ks. Invest in Africa to make Africa great again. And essentially, divest, that's something that was big when I was growing up in the 80s, divest from South Africa. Like all these companies that were supporting apartheid, as they say, that we were like, Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, because the Boers are Dutch, so Shell was heavy in there, Exxon, like a lot of companies that even from childhood up to this day, like now, I've never bought anything from them. You understand? So this divestiture idea, basically saying that we should, as black people, as African people, stop investing in our enemies. Because the analogy I give is, it's like, okay, my older brother, I know that he is a murderer. I know that he's an armed robber. I know that he's a rapist. But anytime he comes back from doing his dirt, he hits me off with like $100. I just keep quiet and I'll oil his gun for him. I know what he's doing, but I'm just gonna keep his gun in order. All right, see you in the morning when you get back, right? That's what black people in the U.S. are doing. No, that's what we're doing. We're supporting this white person, even though we know that the U.S. is going throughout the world raping, killing, plundering, and every single thing we do every single day is like, as long as we get a little bit of, TV show. That's it.
Your kids can go to a nice school.
Right. That's the equivalent of your brother hitting you off with like $100. Except these ones are not our brothers, obviously. And then almost 1 million black people enslaved in the prison industrial complex. Last stats I saw were like 888,000 somewhere thereabout, so just short of 1 million. Because the 13th Amendment is there to enshrine enslavement forever. It says slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within these United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction, except, that's the caveat, that's what I get you, it said except as punishment of a crime whereof the party has been duly convicted. So they were very clear on why they put that except in, because right after that they started convict leasing, right? And that is where anytime it's time to pick the cotton, guess what? There's a crime wave. We got to arrest all these black people and get them to pick the cotton for free. You got quotes from the guards who say this is even better than slavery, because during slavery you had to take care of them even during the winter when they're not working. For this one, you arrest one, you can work them to death, and then you can just go arrest another one. So you get all the benefits without any of the detriments. So I actually wrote an article on that one as well. Legacies of transatlantic enslavement. And part of it, that was a UNESCO project, and part of that was just the point of how are we talking about legacy for something that hasn't ended. And then just giving all these copious examples showing how convict leasing then transformed into the sharecropping, debt peonage, right? Oh, because you're in debt, then you have to just stay here. Those types of things. And where I grew up in North Carolina. There was a sharecropping family like right across the road from us. So it's like all the way. And then how that morphed into the modern day prison industrial complex. Was it Kids for Cash in Philadelphia? You had these judges who were being paid off by the developer who was making these prisons for juveniles. And they said, okay, just send them to prison for anything. You curse the teacher, prison time, because they needed to get more, kids in there. So it was a huge thing. I guess not that huge because a whole lot of people don't know about it. With the Kids for Cash scandal that came through. But that would be my recommendation. Now, the thing is that once we understand what the problems are, that tells us what our life path should be. So the proverb in Chi that says, it translates to one's destiny reveals itself clearly in the living of one's life, right? So once we know, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, then life becomes very easy because it's like, oh, I need to do something about these things that are problems. Now, a lot of people go through life and they have no idea what they need to be doing. Oh, let me just, they're just floating around. So, there's a quote that two hardest things in life, one, to discover your mission, and then one that's even harder is not to betray it.
I was thinking about that before I came, because I feel like I already pretty much know what it is. But for like being an educator, the constant thing that I hear is, try to get out of the classroom, because there's no money there, and it's always about some money type of thing. But I've known I should be doing what I'm doing since like elementary school, pretty much. But I've kind of now been trying to see, listening to people. I should be doing more. You should be a lawyer or diplomat, something that's
the money thing, it goes back to what I was talking about before in terms of Eurasians making, and I say Eurasians because Europe and Asia is really just one thing.
Really?
So, look at a map.
Well,
Europe
yeah,
and Asia is one
but
area.
thinking also.
Yep, especially in terms of that thinking.
Huh.
So Eurasia is one landmass, right? And to speak of Europe as though it's a continent is to buy into visibly, demonstrably inaccurate fiction, right? To say, oh, there's Europe. No, that's just part of Eurasia.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you wanted to say it's a region of Eurasia, okay, you can do whatever you want, but to act like it's a continent, no, it's not. But so because they underwent, this lack of resources over the course of tens of thousands of years, that what they're essentially doing to the rest of the world is making everyone suffer from that lack of resources, and the same thing that happens to the rats in that skinner box, right? And it's how would I say it? It's ultimately based on fraud, based on falsehood, because even when you are in a place of abundance, that there's a means of making you feel, to create that mentality in you that I don't have enough resources, and the way that's done is through money, right? So you have African people who live, next to elephants for 7 million years, live next to water buffalo for 7 million years. They always knew, don't exterminate all of them off of the face of the planet, don't cut their faces off to get ivory and leave the meat, but this is what's going on now. So you see places where rhinos, their horns are just being chopped off and then the rest of the rhino is there. You understand? So the question becomes, okay, this was the case for 7 million years. The water bodies were pure and pristine. Now there's garbage all over. What happened in the last 50 to 100 years that made 7 million years just be wiped away, and now things are going the way they're going right now? And the main thing that happened is, money coming in. Now, money isn't the problem. White folks are the problem. Money is one of many tools that they use in order to accomplish their ultimate goal, which is to survive, usually at the expense of everybody else, right? Now, this will come back to this money piece, that this is a way of creating a false sense of not having enough of something. So if you live in Ghana, you could not starve even if you tried to, because there's some tomatoe leaves growing everywhere. That's a green sauce that people eat. It's right outside my house right here. There you can just keep walking, and then you'll come across, mango trees, just growing somewhere.
Right.
Coconut trees just growing somewhere. There's a trash dump and coconut trees just pop up everywhere. You throw seeds out, there's nothing that will prevent those seeds from turning into watermelons in a couple months. You just spit some seeds out, come back in 3 months. Oh wow, there's some watermelons here. Let me go.
Yeah.
So you're in a place of abundance, but how can you create a mentality of people thinking that I don't have enough? Well, then you give them something that you yourself produce, and then you control the flow of, which is money. And money essentially works like genie wishes, that if you hold on to this thing, you can get whatever you want. Now, I'm also, not only am I the one who grants the wishes, I'm the one who fulfills those desires of what you want, because I'm the one who created the desire for the thing in the first place, right? So all of these things go into why it is that we're kept at basically a subsistence level.
Yeah.
I just need to get a little bit more. But they're the ones who print it. They're the ones who regulate and determine the exchange rate, that the Ghana CD is going to be weak, the dollar is going to be strong, this is going to be weak, this is going to be strong. So you don't have enough of it, so you need to keep trying to get some more. And then it comes out in things that we're talking about, and thinking that those are the problem, but those are just the effects. But to go back to the cause, you have to look at the white folks. And that's the thing. This is why Ghana suffers now and will continue to suffer, is because through miseducation, no one wants to actually look at the matador. That's there's an analogy by Dr. Bobby Wright, another psychologist, the psychopathic racial personality. And the analogy he gives is that if in Spain they have the running of the bull, you have a matador who has a case read and, the bull charges and whatever. So he's saying that this is analogous to our situation in the sense that the bull keeps charging after these capes, and when the bull does that, if you ever actually seen it, what the matador does is stabs the bull as it runs past, right? And keeps doing this, until the bull's like heaving, sides heaving, blood coming, from his neck, whatever. And then the matador comes up, strikes it, kills it, whatever. And this is what the Spanish people look at for fun, right? So he's saying that this is what we do is because we chase after these things that are not the problem. They are instruments used by matadors, but they are not the problem. So some people will be like, oh, the problem is capitalism. Other people are like, no, the problem is neoliberalism. Oh, no, the problem is Christianity, it's the religion. That's the problem. Well, the problem, like, no, none of those are the problem. Those are just tools that the problem is using. Because it's a couple of things. One, on the surface level, is that, actually, let me go to this one first. One is people think that will help them survive. So there's a proverb in Chi, they say, "Opete de nequación al peñinchere," and translates to the vulture uses its stupidity in order to look for a long life. So if you look at how the vulture behaves, it's always on the garbage heap, it's always, eating carrion and all this other stuff. So therefore it's not hunted, and it's not domesticated either. So, a chicken is domesticated, you got all these other animals. But this one that we look at and be like, why are you so dumb? Why are you just eating dead stuff? Why are you on the garbage heap all the time? Well, the fact that it's on the garbage heap, it keeps it from being, hunted down like other birds may be captured or caught or shot or hunted, or pheasants and whatever. Guinea fowls, all these things. So it's doing something that seems stupid, but in the stupid thing it's doing, it's trying to find a way to survive. And I think that on one level, that's what black people are doing, because they see whites as predators. So if we act like ostriches and just put our heads in the sand, then maybe they'll let me, survive in the short term. Now, putting your life into the hands of a criminal felon, and that's the psychopathic racial personality he's talking about white folks. Putting your life in their hands is definitely not something that will work in the long term. However, people are just like, well, in the short term, this works in my own individual lifetime. I'm not concerned about a generation or whatever. If I can just survive right now, and so that's one, it's a survival mechanism. Now, those who see survival on the long-term scale, we're thinking about African liberation, because again, it's shown, history shows that putting yourself at the mercy of these white Neanderthals is not something that works out for us, right? Because we end up exterminated, we end up imprisoned, we end up enslaved, we end up whatever it is. It's never a good look, Even on individual levels, by and large, just short of 1 million people in slavery right now in the U.S., that's not a good look. So some people are like, oh, let's fight for African liberation. You understand? Other people are like, well, those who fought for African liberation got shot in coup d'etat and whatever else, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara. So let me just stay in this lane, right? Yeah. So that's the similar thing that they would do on the plantation, that the more rebellious Africans, if somebody stole a chicken or anything, they just use anything as a pretense to do basically a preemptive strike, right? To say, okay, that guy is the one we want to get. So now any pretense, let's string him up and make an example of him for everybody else. So then everybody else knows, oh, don't mess with master, just go along with it. Yes, and boss, right? So it becomes artificial selection. So when we talk about natural selection, that's this idea of survival of the fittest. Artificial selection is what's done by breeders with dogs, right? So that's where that person is the one who determines whether this dog is going to be allowed to mate with that dog, or whether it will be spayed or neutered. The ones that attack children, put it down, right? The ones that are friendly and allow those to live. So over the course of thousands of years, this is how every dog breed in existence came into existence, that they're all derived ultimately from wolves, right? but through the process of breeding selectively. And there was actually a good documentary, well, the documentary, it wasn't good per se, but it had good information, called Cosmos by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I want to say it was either in the second or third episode, I think the third episode. He goes into just that, the difference between natural selection and artificial selection. So he says, all right, so dogs came about from artificial selection. So early human beings, they would be next to fires, but you have certain wolves that, because of their own chemical makeup, whatever other processes, that some are less scared of fire than others. So they're willing to stay closer to human beings to get, the scraps or whatever that's left over. So those ended up being the ones that became domesticated. The ones who were so afraid of fire that they never came close, those are the ones who ended up staying wild. So the artificial selection is everything down to a chihuahua is from human beings deciding this is going to mate with this. They keep getting bigger, they keep getting Great Dane. All of those are human decisions, so now all of this is artificial selection. But dogs are allowed to live, whereas places like Yellowstone National Park, they had extermination of wolves campaign. So in the early 1900s, I want to say around the 1920s, they exterminated every wolf there. So the dogs are like, yeah, I think we need to just keep on keeping on, right? Because if I want to exist, I better do this. Of course, that ended up messing up the ecosystem. The elks started, their population just, exploded. Then they started overgrazing. And then because they were overgrazing, the beavers weren't able to get the wood that they needed to dam up the system. So that had a chain reaction effect. When you take the top predator out of the system, then everything else just ends up going haywire. So they ended up having to reintroduce the wolves. Now, this is how it relates to black people, and my father gives this as an example, that the elks that were there when they reintroduced the wolves, the first elks, they hadn't seen wolves in generations, right? So the first elks, when the wolves were reintroduced, they didn't run when the wolves approached. They didn't know their natural predator. They just, right? And that's our situation. So, we're working next to white folks like, hey, this is all good. And, that's exactly our situation. If you don't know who your predator is, they can let, and the wolves were just like, wow, this is great. This is paradise, dumb elk. So they could just walk up, slaughter and slaughter. Eventually they got the point, and then they started doing their natural behavior. And then the ecosystem came back into balance, right? Because they start doing this thing. So the other analogy, so all of that was just to say the people who don't want to deal with white folks, they're doing it as an artificial, they're doing it as a survival strategy in order to just capitulate to artificial selection and say, you be the human, I'll be the dog, right? Right? Henry Louis Gates, all these folks, I'll just be the dog and you allow me to live, please, right? Yeah. And they'll say, okay, well, I'll allow you to live as long as you're useful, right? Some of you, and that's actually what the Germans did in Namibia. They said the Nama, they're too weak to work, so let's just exterminate them wholesale. And there are whole Nama groups that are no longer in existence because they were small in stature and they were also, they were militarily superior. So what the whites had to do is that they had to use deception. So they told the Nama that, if you surrender, then we'll sit down and negotiate with you. You can go back to your land. We'll give you food and so forth and so on, and everything will be hunky-dory. So somewhere around 4,000 Nama people surrendered, men, women, children, elderly. So once they did, they were taken to the very first concentration camps in the world, right? So they took them to the concentration camps and literally worked them to death. When you say work to death, I'm not talking about Walmart work to death. I'm saying literally they weren't fed anything but uncooked rice and weren't given any pots, so they had to chew the rice and then they were given uncooked flour. And that's it. And then they had to build the railroad tracks that are in Namibia right now. They had to build a quay, going out into sea out of heavy stones. So, and basically they killed the men off first, and then it ended up being the women and elderly who had to do the rest. And the population was decimated to just a couple hundred, right, left on the face of the land now. So again, it goes back to the point of artificial selection. If you put your livelihood and well-being in the hands of genocidal murderers, psychopathic racial personalities, And that's the point that Dr. Bobby Wright makes in his paper. It's also a book, you can get it in book form, you can find it online though, where he says it's pathological for black people to try to use moral suasion against white people who are people who have no morality where race is the variable. And that's exactly what they said. They said, we don't have to use the conventions of war that we use among other white people because those people are savages. So all you have to do is, and that's what they call projection in psychology. Because those are savages, we can take a gun and blow this baby's head off as it's in the hands of the mother. You know, the elderly, we've already shot them, let's go up and bayonet them and disembowel them and then cut their heads off and then send the heads off for measuring, phrenology, right? Because they are savages, therefore we can do whatever we want to, right? So that's the whole thing.
But you know, what I'm thinking now as you're saying all this is I can even be having this conversation with people and you say, well, you know, if it was switched around, Africans could do the same.
There's a reason why they have to say that, right? Because that is capitulating to artificial selection, right? That's saying, therefore, because of what I'm saying, therefore I don't have to confront white folks, and therefore they won't exterminate me.
Right.
That's the point.
Okay, right. You don't have to think about what we just said. Yeah.
Because, you know, the whole thing is, why are you saying what you're saying? You're saying what you're saying because you see this as a survival mechanism, a survival strategy. Because what's the end result? The end result is don't confront white folks. Right? That's why. But then, just to counter that, I was talking to, again, the same brother from Namibia, a brother named Awene, and, you know, he was saying something that I already was aware of in other places as well, that when the Herero, when the Awambo people came to what's now Namibia, that they were already Khoikhoi people, already San people, or they call the Khoisan the short people, right? Pejoratively called pygmies and, you know, bushmen and whatever. That the Bantu people, they had numerical superiority, they had military superiority, they had physical in terms of stature, because these are like tiny people. You want to wipe them. But they had these laws that they instituted that there are places that is the land for those people you're not allowed to go there and even settle on their land. You understand? So here you have cases of people who could have, if they wanted to, completely obliterated these Tinitayu people, but they did not. They said, we're going to live in harmony. That's your land. This is our land. A portion. I knew of the same thing in the Congo. You have Bayaka people. All of these people are called pygmies by white folk. Bayaka people, Bambuti people, and Batwa people, right? So you have all of these people who are associated with these Bantu groups. So again, Bantu people are like people my stature and bigger, right? And you have obvious, but Bantu people stretch from basically Cameroon all the way to Kenya, all the way down to South Africa. They had numerical superiority, they had military superiority, they had physical in terms of stature superiority, all of these things. But what ended up happening is that the indigenous people who were already there ended up pairing with the different Bantu groups, right? So now these are like, it's like a symbiotic relationship where they could have chosen to wipe them out of the face of the planet, but now they're brothers. So these people are brothers to those people. These people are brothers and sisters to those people, and so forth and so on. So you have all these people who are either assimilated into the population through intermarriage, or, you know, they stay on their land, that's their land, you're not allowed to go there. Right? So you have, and then you have, there's a book that came before Columbus that documents the Olmec heads that you find there in Mexico. So these are multi-ton boulders that show all the black people who travel. There's one you should look at specifically called El Negro, because what white folks try to do is say, oh, those are just the indigenous people, they just had broad noses or their tools weren't sharp enough to do it, whatever. But the one called El Negro, that shows them, like all the other ones tend to have like military style helmets that you'll find. But this one has just the afro, right? So they can't explain that one away because all the features are African, but then the afro too, you can't do nothing with that. But again, here are black people who, according to Christopher Columbus, had already traveled there, according to testimonials of the people who were there. So when they are going to the so-called New World, at the place where they did it is where all these boulders are, where the pyramids are, that there's an intercultural exchange that does not include genocide. It does not include smallpox blankets. It does not include all these other things. Mansa Musa, in his testimony to the Al-Omari, so he's known for the pilgrimage to Mecca. So when he arrived in Cairo, he gave an interview for a historian who was asking how did he become the Mansa. He says, I became Mansa because my maternal uncle abdicated the throne in order to sail across the Atlantic with a fleet of ships, right? He says, and because we do matrilineal succession, and I was his nephew, that's how I came to be the Mansa. And he goes into how the fleet went, they almost arrived, there was a storm, so the kingship, Abu Bakr II, returned, and he set out again with an even larger fleet. After, a few years, I want to say 6 years, they understood that he wasn't coming back. They said, okay, so he's no longer king, now you're the king. So he said, that's how I came to be the ruler of Mali. This is what they usually call Nyani. So Mali is referring to the Malinke people, but the name of the nation itself was called Nyani. So all of that is to say, so here you have a whole squadron of ships that go there, but when the whites come after that, there are people there. They haven't been decimated, right? So obviously they had naval superiors that are going across the Atlantic Ocean. They have numerical superiors, they have military superiors. They could have wiped them out to the point where when Christopher Columbus came, he could have just found an empty landscape. You understand? But instead of that, they found Olmec heads. They found pyramids at the exact same place where the Olmec heads are. You understand? So this is to say that there's something fundamentally different with Eurasians, because every single place they've ever set foot, complete genocide. And then even the same thing dealing with Namibia, just African people can't even conceive of behaving as Eurasians behave, because there was what they call the Waterberg massacre. This is where this Neanderthal called Von Trotha decided to exterminate every single Herero person off the face of the planet in the name of progress, in the name of Darwinism, so forth and so on. The weaker races should go so the stronger races can take that land, because those people can't develop it. Or they're not even people, whatever they are, they can't develop it. So they did an encirclement strategy. The idea was to completely encircle those people as they're sleeping. First, we don't want to confront them, this is the white folks saying. We don't want to confront them directly because we'll lose, right? Even though they have Maxim guns and so forth and so on, they didn't want to confront them, so they waited till those people were sleeping, and then they encircled them, so that in the morning, somewhere around 5 a.m., grenades, bombs, cannons, machine guns on men, women, children, elderly. The African people couldn't even conceive that anyone could ever even do that. You understand? And again, this misconception of reality, that what the men tried to do was they said, what we'll do, we're the warriors, we'll go across the river and we'll lure them away, right? They'll come after us. So the women, the children, the elderly were left there. But what did the white folks do? The stories of the German soldiers who took a part of it, they blew the heads off of the children. They would take shotguns, all types of guns, and this is like fun, right? Blow the heads off of the children, rape the women before killing them, bayonet them to death. Elderly, cut their heads off and then send them off for scientific experimentation in Germany. This is what they did to the men, women, and children. This was inconceivable. But not for white folks. They can definitely conceive it, and they do it right now. They'll bomb a place, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, men, women, children, elderly, non-discriminatory there. And look at what the Japanese did against the Chinese. The Nanking massacre, what they call the rape of Nanking, millions and millions and millions of Chinese obliterated. Nanking used to be the capital. The reason why it's no longer the capital is because of that. the rape of Nanking. You can look that up. So that was a huge genocide done by Japan, and that's the reason why China and Japan don't get along too well, because Imperial Japan was very much imperial. That's why I say Eurasia is one land mass.
I was really thinking why Japan made it into the G7.
They're all Eurasians. They are all Eurasians. And whatever problems they have internally, those problems never supersede the problems they have with us as black people. You understand? So, yeah, all of that, tells us something. And then, so the Herero did their uprising first. After that, the Nama did their uprising under the leadership of Hendrik Witbooi. And what they did is that they said, we're keeping our code of honor, right? This is what the Nama is saying. We say we know that they kill women, children, elderly. We'll try to send ours away. But anytime we attack them, we're only going to attack the men. So there were cases where they escorted women and children to safety. They had all, you understand, this is the African mentality, like, we're human, we're soldiers. Well, the whites are saying, no, you're savages, so anything goes. You understand? So you can see all these cases all throughout history of African people miscalculating how Eurasians behave and thinking that they behave like human beings. So if we think they behave like human beings, obviously they couldn't do this. And then lo and behold, they do what they've done every single place they've ever set foot on the face of the planet without any exception. You understand? So even in times of how the Nama people surrendered, the whites said they were going to negotiate. So obviously you can't go back on your word. So this is the problem that the Africans had once again, that they were thinking that white folks were going to act like human beings. Meanwhile, that was, of course, a ruse to exterminate them off of the face of the planet. So yeah, that's the problem. And if you look at, so I studied military history as well. So if you look at so many times African people were defeated, it's because of a miscalculation of thinking that whites were human beings and were going to behave as such. So okay, yeah, let's just put down our arms because they're going to negotiate. Like no, they won't. No. Same thing happened Palmares in Brazil. Like I can just list off so many, examples. The indigenous people in the U.S. Wounded Knee, where they shot and killed men, women, children, everything. They got the higher position, and then so what they did, the indigenous people were going to have what they call spirit dances, right, to honor their ancestors and so forth and so on, men, women, children, elderly. And they were intercepted by the U.S. military. The military said, okay, just, have your camp here, everything will be fine. So in the morning, well, before morning, they went up to a high place overseeing the campsite that they told them to be at. But before they did that, they had taken everything that could be used as a weapon, including forks, including knives, including like pins in women's hair. They took every single thing that could possibly be used as any kind of weapon. Then they set up, guns, cannons, everything down on this camp where they had the specific place where they said, yeah, you should stay here. So then in the morning, guess what happened? Cannon fire, guns, they obliterated. The massacre of Wounded Knee, you should look this up if you're not familiar with it. Massacred men, massacred women, massacred children. There were a few who ended up surviving. And so they just had this volley for however long, just to kill everybody. A few who ended up surviving, there was a story of one woman who eventually got to a shelter, and she just kept asking for water. She tried to drink the water, and the water came out of her neck because there was a bullet hole that had pierced her neck, and that's why she, was feeling so apart. So, all of these are things that white folks do and have done. So there's a good book called Yurugu, Y-U-R-U-G-U. You know Yurugu?
Yeah, but I have not read it.
Yeah, you need to read it. I recommend reading it cover to cover. But really, it goes into Dr. Maremba Ani.
So
She was there in Atlanta too.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. So basically, it goes into the foundation of Eurasian thought. One, I'll say there are two main things. If you whittle everything away, there are two major things that are the core essence of Eurasian thought. One is to say one thing and do the opposite. To say all men are created equal while you're enslaving people in your backyard. Now, people would think that's hypocrisy or contradiction. That is right in line with the core of who they are, right? The problem that they have with, like, a Machiavelli is that he's being honest and saying, look, this is who we are, this is how to do it, cutthroat, do this, do that. They don't have a problem with anything that he's saying, just the fact that he's saying it truthfully. You understand? So that's one, is quote-unquote lying, saying one thing, doing the other. The other thing is diametric opposites and dichotomization.
Yeah.
One thing has to be good, its opposite has to be evil, and they're always in conflict. This is how you get to a God versus devil. This is how you get to man versus nature. This is how you get to man versus God. This is how you get to man versus woman. This is how you get to every single thing, right? And you see it in their mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology. Every single thing is about this thing in conflict with this thing. So if you look at African mythology, African stories, it's about complementary opposites. That here is the male, here is the female. This one completes this one, and this one completes this one. They're not complete unless both exist and both are whole. So it's an entirely different worldview. When you start off with the Eurasian worldview, everything that we see, down to genocide, massacre, Holocaust, so forth, imprisonment, enslavement, all those things are the natural outgrowth of that worldview. Those two things, right? Saying one thing, doing the other, and then dichotomization. Everything else grows from that. And then for the African worldview, everything grows from, one, this idea of complementarity, and then two, ma'at. Yeah, that's Malimu Burundi, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those two things, the idea of complementary opposites, but then the core is ma'at, and that's what you see on this poster here, on this poster there. Truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, order, balance, propriety, reciprocity. Those core, ideas as the core virtues, and everything else, extends from that. So if you look at the primary text, you always see, these translations as truth, translations as justice, so forth and so on. So that, and the way ma'at is written in Murder Nurture is what looks like a pedestal, like a foundation to stand on. So even for the conception of the people of Kemet, this is the foundation on which everything else, is built. Right, and then also there's the issue of confusing, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier, confusing form with essence. Confusing form with essence. That is to say that, so like for example the Vitboy and Nama, as they're fighting against the Germans, they're saying, to be African we need to not kill these women and children. To be African we need, so that's the means, that's the method, that's the form in which Africanism happens to be expressed, specifically among African people. However, when we look at Ma'at, it talks about propriety in terms of doing the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. So when you're dealing with these Germans who are killing men, women, and children, there may need to be a reevaluation of these forms that we were using to interact with each other. In terms of, all right, well, now what are you going to do with somebody who, and it's 20/20 hindsight, but now they're wiped off of the face of the planet, so they can't do anything about it. You understand? At least not in the form of a human being. They can be sand, in a grave. They can be bones somewhere. But in the form of a human being, they can't do anything in terms of implementing justice.
I'm still not seeing what do you mean by form of essence. Like if they were small, do you mean if they were small?
So when I say essence, I'm talking about principle, right? When I'm talking about form, I'm talking about practice. So the practice is that I always go to the river in this way. I always do this thing this way. So that is the behavioral manifestation of something. So here, this is the foundation, but then the way I practice it in terms of culture, the way I practice it in terms of how I interact with people, you understand? So all of those things are different forms. However, the essence is, the principle that gave rise to the form. So if I say respect human beings, well, you may see that in African culture in terms of how people greet. You understand? So the essence is respect human beings. So now how do we implement that essence in terms of how I interact with others? You understand? Now, the problem that comes with confusing form with essence is that when we become wedded to, let's greet people. Now, here's somebody who has a machine gun pointed towards my house, but I'm coming out, I'm trying to hug them.
Right.
So that's inappropriate. So propriety, doing the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. So I say, my culture teaches to greet people, so I don't care. I'm just going to go out hugging. And then guess what? Pop, 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 pop. That was confusing form with essence, right? So some of those essential things, some of those principles and so forth and so on, those are the things to be held on to more than the behavioral manifestations of how they should be applied in one specific context, but perhaps should not be applied in another context.
Think about that one. What that looks like.
And like what I'm pulling from is that there is a text called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, what these Neanderthals call the Book of the Dead. But in it there's a line, actually it's spread across a couple lines, but refers to Amen Ra as the one and only one who has no second, as that which is one but with many arms, right? So Amen, it comes from the root word min, which is to be hidden. So the idea is that which is hidden and then that which is manifest. Ra is what in English we refer to as the sun. So this is what is visible, that which we can see. So basically, to get to everything, a shorthand way of saying every single thing that exists, is to say that which is seen and unseen, that which is hidden and that which is manifest. So basically to say that Amen Ra is the one and only one who has no second is to say that every single thing that exists is one, that which we can see, and then two, that which we cannot see. You understand? So this is the idea of Amen as the essence, that which is hidden inside of everything else, right? So if you want to say, my divinity is powerful, well, Amen is inside of that one too. You understand? That which is omnipresent, omniscient, so forth and so on. And then Ra, that which is manifest. So basically you can think about Amen in relation to human beings as the worldview of a people. And then you can think about Ra in the sense of like the cultural expression of the people, right? So this particular cultural expression here may look different from this particular cultural expression there, but this is where the significance of the second part of that which is only one but that has many arms. So you can look at Akan culture here in Ghana as one arm, but it's ultimately tied to that which is one, which is African worldview. You could look at Ghana culture, you could look at everywhere culture. Now, if you just take them on their own, they all look like different things. Well, these people wear their cloth this way, and these people wear their cloth that way, right? But once you get to the core principles, then you see that, no, these are just different manifestations of that which is ultimately one thing, which is the African worldview. And the core aspects of the African worldview, one, Ma'at, and then two, this idea of complementary. There are several things. There's a good book called Person, Divinity, and Nature. Chukwunyere Kamalu, I would highly recommend that. But when you read that, you'll get a sense of these core things that cut across space and time and that form the core of the African worldview.
Okay, so when you're saying all these things, this is going back to confusing form again. So basically you're saying what we're doing right now is we're looking at everything as being separate. Okay.
Yeah, that's one. We're looking at these different manifestations as being separate. And then two, the point about confusing form with essence is thinking that, okay, this cultural practice is something that we should keep doing in perpetuity, right, even when it is something that's harmful in this particular context, even when it's something that has... And I was listening to my father, he gave a talk, an interview where he was saying, all right, let's look at the left side of the page and the right side of the page, and then on the left side of the page, put everything black people are doing. So you got some black people who are in the church, you got some black people who are in Islam, Masjid, you got some black people who are Masons, Freemasons, you got some black people who are practicing African spirituality, they're Yoruba, you got all these different things. So he just listed like 40, 50 things. We're doing all those things. He said, okay, so now on the right side of the page, here's what white folks are doing. It says none of these things that we've done as black people have stopped white folks from doing what they do. All right? So whether it's committing murder, committing genocide, we want to talk about the police, we want to talk about lynchings, we want to talk about eugenics, the abortion clinics. So they're proceeding with their program every single day. And nothing that we're doing on this left side of the page is doing anything to prevent them from doing what they do.
Okay.
Right?
So I don't mean to cut you off.
No
I'm trying
problem.
to get it. So the image that comes to mind is there was a line of police officers, and there were people protesting, and the lady came out there with a sage stick and was saging the officers down. Is that an example of like where you're still doing something, but it's not really the time for it, or
Sounds like it.
to me?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Right? So, yeah, there's a time for saging people. There's a time for not saging people. That may have been an inappropriate time.
Yeah, because things are still happening. Okay.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's the thing. So all these cultural practices, so then it comes to, okay, so now what should we do? And that's where the thinking actually starts. So now how do we prevent them from killing us or doing what they've done every single square inch of the planet Earth that they've ever set foot on? So now we have to start thinking. One thing is divesting from them. I don't have to invest in your killing me. Right? Let me minimize, let me downsize. Like corporations downsize, let me downsize all these created tastes and desires. Understand? That's on the smallest level possible, but it's something that, okay, that's something that I can do so that my behavior and my words match. Right? And then just look at Ma'at. So Ma'at isn't about let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. We're talking about justice. We're talking about reciprocity. And it's fundamentally unjust for these Neanderthals, these pale white Eurasians, to kill men, women, and children, to enslave, men, women, and children, to do all the things that they've done in the past and they do right now. Where's the justice in that? So you cannot continue to hate Ma'at and then expect things to go well for you. I say hate Ma'at in the sense of hating justice, because you'll see all these things that they've done, and then black people say, oh, we gotta forgive them. Right. That's how you hate Ma'at. That's how you hate justice. Okay. And things will not be well for you if you hate justice, if you hate truth.
Forgive because the Bible says.
Of course. That's why they gave it to you.
Right.
That's why they gave it to you.
Right.
There's a brother, Kamal Tehuti Makesi. Was it Makesi Tehuti? I may have it the other way. But he has a book called How to Make a Negro Christian. And essentially he looks at the life of this white guy, Charles Colcock Jones, Reverend Charles Colcock Jones. Now before this, black people in the U.S. were practicing what they call that old-time religion, which is what white folks will say superstition, all this Africa stuff that they were doing before. Because whites didn't want to convert them to Christianity. So this is from 1619, pretty much on a steady stream up to the late 1700s, going into the early 1800s, that they did not want black people to be Christians, because the idea is that if you convert them to Christianity, you have to let them free. You have to set them free. You can't enslave a Christian. So what Charles Colcock Jones' innovation was we can say that we are freeing them in the hereafter, right? Right. So we don't have to free them physically. We can say we freed them in another way. And then that was like caught on like wildfire. Like, yeah, that's great. That's a great idea. So that's where what they call a Great Awakening happened, which is all this proselytizing, so forth and so on. And that's where black people started to be, Christianized or whatever you want to call this thing, whitenized, right? Now, the way it semi-backfired, I only say semi, was that when black people got their hands on the Bible, they were reading about Exodus and Moses and, let my people go, and then so Nat Turner, I should say Nana, that's a title of respect, Nana Nat Turner, Nana Denmark Vesey, Nana Gabriel Prosser, all of these were preachers, Christian preachers, and they were on the hell and brimstone, fire and brimstone, saying that, what I'm doing is prophesized, that they've enslaved our people and so forth and so on. So whites knew why they were giving you the Bible. Some people tried to flip it and do something else, but ultimately, and this is why I say semi, that as soon as you get into the Bible and as soon as you accept that there is a God and a devil, you've become a Eurasian. Even if your skin is black, you've taken on diametric opposites, dichotomization. You've gone into the path of Eurasian thought. Let me say trends of Eurasian thought. This is what they tend to do. But then to come back to Ma'at is talking about propriety, and that's to say things have their place and have their time. So there may be some time where dichotomization, it's not dichotomization is bad all the time, because then dichotomization just becomes the new devil. Then it comes to the point of when is it useful for African people for our survival, when is it useful perhaps for the restoration of Ma'at, and the present of Isfet, which is chaos, so forth and so on.
Yeah, okay. See, I was going to ask about that. So, all of this is telling me that there's way more to learn and actually read for myself rather than bits of information. But like in Yoruba, for instance, they talk about, what I did learn from my voodoo class is that they still have like demonic or like, bad spirits or whatever, but there's a time and a place for those kinds of things, I guess. When you say chaos, or even death, for instance. So is that the function of like so-called bad things? It's not necessarily a dichotomy, but like, I guess that's what I think of as like the process of nature, like decay and growth.
Yeah. Again, so I've recommended Person, Divinity, and Nature because it goes into African concepts of morality of conduct rather than morality of being. So what Eurasians get into is that these ideas of fundamental alienation and original sin, that is that in your essence you are fundamentally bad. And that's the reason why an imaginary white boy has to, fly up from wherever and save your soul, because you're fundamentally bad because of a woman. All of that is, when you listen to their mythology, it tells you so much about who they are. So first, God has to be a man, a white man, and then the one who causes the downfall first has to be made from just the rib of a man, and then has to cause the destruction of everyone. And all of those false premises are what lead to the conclusion. So now you need this imaginary white boy to come and save your soul, right? And all of those things are, so problematic, obviously, on multiple levels. But, so it goes into this idea of morality of conduct. That means that because of how you behave, that's what is seen as what's good or what's bad. But even that is perspective, because something that you may consider bad, there may be a shred of good inside of it, something that you consider good. So like all these things that have happened to us as African people, the good that could come from it is if we establish justice, if we establish reciprocity, right? So it's not necessary for whites to be bad all the time, because the good thing that can come out of all the death, destruction, murder, genocide, so forth would be, and that's predicated on our taking responsibility to do so, if we restore Ma'at and drive away Isfet, which wouldn't have happened if they didn't behave the way that they behaved. We wouldn't have even needed to come onto the world stage and do that. But because they existed, that now predicates that we need to do what we need to do in order to ensure justice. So you have, by conservative estimates, over 200 million Africans either at the bottom of what they used to call the Ethiopian Ocean, what we now call the Atlantic Ocean, That's fundamentally unjust. There's no reciprocity in there. So now, in Ma'at also talks about balance. So, and most black people, if you talk to them, they don't want any type of justice. They don't want, like I've actually had a conversation in this room. Somebody was like, yeah, we don't want any type of thing. Let's just forget the past and, let's move forward. So that means this person hates Ma'at. You can't hate balance. You can't hate justice. You can't hate reciprocity and turn your back on all of those things and expect things to go well for you. But it's a short-term survival strategy, because if you confront them, we've seen what happens when you confront them. So let's just accept that they can't kill all of us. Maybe, or hope that they can't kill all of us, and put our lives in the hands of a felon, right? A psychopathic racial personality. So that's that. But just in terms of good and bad, there's a book called Self-Healing Power and Therapy. You should write that down.
Yes. Self-Healing
Power and Therapy. And what it goes into is this idea of Kala and Kalazima. It goes into what's called the Dikenga, which is like a cycle, right, that goes from conception to birth to high point to death, which is transitioning back to conception. And the idea is that the human being is like a living sun. So we all go through conception, we go through our birth, we go through a high point. So that's what the sun does. It's at midnight, then it comes to, dawn, then it comes to noon, then it comes to sunset. Ultimately, and the idea that's another thing that's fundamental to African thought, is the idea that just because the sun sets, it doesn't stop existing. So energy, so now that comes to us in physics, they say energy isn't created or destroyed, it's only transformed, right? So this is what undergirds why we pour libation, because even though my ancestor passed away, that doesn't mean that they stop existing. They exist in just a different form. You can think about that like the blood in your veins. They say human being is made out of 60 or 70% water, right? So when you pass on, that water just doesn't stop existing. It continues to transform. So it becomes a cloud, it becomes rain, it becomes river, it becomes ocean, comes back, goes through whatever, it becomes water I drink, whatever. So these things aren't created or destroyed, they just transform. What used to flow through somebody's veins as blood is now coming down as rainwater today. Something 2,000 years ago, 4,000, 10,000 years, is now what I'm drinking. Right? So the African worldview isn't belief, it's knowledge. It's fundamentally based on what is observable. We know that this doesn't stop existing. We know that when the sun sets, it doesn't stop existing from our perspective. From our perspective, we're seeing the sun set. We know that, no, that's not, that it doesn't exist anymore. And there's, lots of evidence that the sun continues to exist, such as the reflection of the light off of the moon. Like, we have certain things that confirm this. So we know that our ancestors don't stop existing because we remember what they said. Right? We remember what they did. The house that they built is still there, so they live on through what they said, what they did, what they created, what they built, what they put in me, my genetic me package. That when they talk about Ubuntu, usually they talk about like, oh, let's all hold hands. Well, the concept is Muntungu Muntunga Bantu. And translate to it, the human being is a human being because of human beings. And the idea of that, usually they translate as I am because we are, because they're thinking about how white folks say I think, therefore I am. But that's not what the proverb is even saying. It's not even saying I am because we are. It's saying a human being is a human being because of human beings. And this is something that is fundamentally, it should be obvious, because if your parents didn't meet, would you be here? That you are the human being you are because those two people met on that day and things went wherever they went, and now you were conceived and now you're here. That before those two people could get together, these four grandparents had to get together. So you exist. You are a human being because of those four grandparents. This woman and this man had to be in that spot at that time. This woman, this man had to be in that spot at that time for those things. Then you go to 8, then you go to 16, then you go to 32, then you go to 64. That you, as you exist, you exist because of all those ancestors who came before. So that's not belief. That is fundamentally observable, testable, and just the fact that I'm here sitting, speaking about it, tells me that I exist because of all those people, right? Now we could look on the synchronic stage of, as I'm a child, now I need food. So if my mother isn't here to give me food, then I may not survive. If my father isn't doing this, if I don't have these social relationships. But even before we come to all of these things, just the fact that you exist fundamentally is due to social media, and the fact that you continue to exist is because of the network of social relations. If there isn't a farmer somewhere, then guess what? You ain't eating. But all these different references I'm giving you, I have a course that I taught at the University of Ghana called Foundations of African Thought. Okay. And I recorded all of them and have the slides for all of them, and those are available on the site, as I mentioned to you, bbtumi.com. So like, just in the short time we're talking is kind of like a summary of what's like 15 classes worth of information.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I guess my other question is, I don't want to keep you for too long. I just had a couple more questions. Do you think that it's necessary, repatriation is necessary for I guess, the restoration of Ma'at, re-Africanization of whiteness?
Yeah, in terms of de-Africanization, de-whitenization. So, the simple answer would just be yes. The more nuanced response would be, like I think about this often because, one, when you're over there, you're financing your enemy. You're helping them do all the criminal things that they do all throughout the world, right? Every single, I look at repatriation as robbing Fort Knox. It's like robbing the bank, because all the money that you would spend giving it to your white enemies,
right,
that 100,000 you would have spent over the course of 4 years is now no longer there. It's like I just took $100,000 from their pockets, from the bank,
right,
and now I'm circulating it here. But again, money fundamentally itself is an issue, but you get the point. So that's that. Now, at the same time, I look at, there's a book called Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams that goes into, all right, if we had all this stuff, we were so great, whatever, what happened? And he answers what happened, that anytime we let these pale white Eurasians into our sphere, they behave the way that they behave every single place they've ever set foot on the face of the planet. He gives case study after case study after case study of here is a nation that was going strong for 2,000 years. Whites came in, 500 years, it's gone, right? Whites came in, 100 years, it's gone. Here are people like Lutrurita, this one doesn't go into that, but what I was mentioned before, Lutrurita, which was an indigenous name of Tasmania, that these people had been there for over 10,000 years, at the lowest estimate over 10,000 years. Within around 100 years, every single last one obliterated from the face of the planet Earth. So, yeah, you're fine. Boom, y'all don't exist anymore, right? Now, I think about the white infiltration, especially like in terms of places like Kemet, right? So Kemet, that means land of black people, and the people call themselves Kemetiu, which just means black people. And what's so significant about that is, prior to the unification of Kemet, you had people who called themselves all kind of stuff, like, all right, I'm Ilnu, I'm from Ilnu, I'm from Khemnu, I'm from this, I'm from that, I'm from Abju, whatever. Ken said Juru. But with the unification, everybody called themselves Kemetiu, which means we're all black people. So this is the umbrella term. Whatever you called yourself before, you can keep calling yourself that, but all of that is under the umbrella of we're all Kemetiu. We're all just black people, right? And that's very significant. One, ancient Pan-Africanism, and I'm writing a book on this, ancient Pan-Africanism, it grew up from Kemet for the same reasons that modern Pan-Africanism grew up, because when you have common enemies, you come together on the basis of what you have in common, which in Kemet, here is southwestern Eurasia, what they call the Middle East, that's right there. You have an enemy at your doorstep. So you come together on the basis of what you have in common, and that's what the oldest military text, the autobiography of Winnie, talks about. It says, when His Majesty took military action against the Eurasian sand dwellers, he brought together an army of Upper and Lower Kemet from both sides of the house, from Wawat Nubians, from Erjet Nubians, from Ka'au Nubians, from every... So not only Kemet as a nation state, but Nubia, which is further to the south, every kind of black person in existence was conscripted to fight against these Eurasians. Now here we're talking about over 4,500 years ago, thereabout. So the very first military document talks about black people coming together to fight their pale white Eurasian enemy. And that's what's so profound about it. And that's also why, if you look at Napoleon, he invaded Haiti, he invaded Kemet, because Haiti is another example of all those black people before it. Some will call themselves Fon, some will call themselves Mukongo, some will call themselves, Ewe, some will call themselves Akan, some will call themselves Ekiti, some will call themselves Ijebu. They'll call themselves a gajillion things, but they came to understand in that context that, whatever we were calling ourselves before, we're not being lynched because of that. We're not being raped because of that. They don't even know the difference between a Fauna and a Yoruba or anything else. It's like, what is that? So it makes sense for us to come together on the basis of what we have in common in order to fight our common enemy, and that's what they did in Haiti. So there's a letter from Napoleon to Francois Mitterrand, who was his Minister of Foreign Affairs, where he says, so Haiti was more profitable than all 13 colonies combined. They call it the Pearl of the Antilles. More profitable than everything else in the Western Hemisphere for any country was Haiti, right, for France. Now, what's profound about this is Napoleon says that what I'm doing is not so much for economic concerns, but to crush the seed of revolt anywhere in the world. And another version, so I've seen the original document of that one. Another version translates the French, and that says, I'm doing it to stop the forward march of blacks in the world.
Right.
So here he's invading Haiti, which is one example of black people coming together on the basis of being black. Then he's invading Egypt, which is the other major example of black people coming together on the basis of being black. So there's a scholar named Dr. Jacob Carruthers, now an ancestor Nana Jacob Carruthers, who bases much of his work on Haiti and Kemet because he understood that link, right? That once we understand that we're all black people, regardless of location, regardless of whatever else, the problems that we have internal to each other should never supersede the problems we have with our common enemies. And that's what white folks said at the Berlin Conference, right? Because they had African trading partners, right? They had all these bonds and treaties that they signed with this African ruler or that African ruler. They had all that stuff, but they didn't invite a single one there. Zero. And it wasn't on the basis of, we're only inviting the major big nations. No, because they're doing it in Belgium. In Berlin, but they're inviting Belgium, which is the size of this room, basically. That's a hyperbole. But it's a teeny tiny little thing, right? But that's who you're going to invite, but you're not inviting the Zulu Empire. You're not inviting Yoruba people. How many, nowadays somewhere 30, 40 million, at that time, I don't know, maybe 20. But you're not inviting on the basis of any of those things, who's, got more people, who's whatever. They said, look, at the end of the day, we're all white. So Russia was invited. The U.S. was invited. Not no black people from the U.S. France was there. Portugal was there. All of these white folks, UK, all of these white folks are there. Austria, Hungary, everybody who's white is there. Because they were very clear on who they are and who their enemies are. That's us. The issue that we have is that we are not learning the lesson of Haiti and Kemet, that whatever problems we have between each other, and Ghanaians don't like Nigerians, right? Caribbeans don't like Americans, quote unquote, African Americans, like all this garbage. Sigmas don't like Thetas and whatever. Bloods don't like Crips and whatever. That there's a fundamental lesson that is intentionally kept from us, which is Haiti, Kemet. Haiti, Kemet. So they keep Haiti in the position that it's in order to, again, just like Napoleon said, crush the seed of revolt. Picture a seed that you planted and it grows up anywhere. So when you look at the impoverishment of Haiti, it is because these pale white Neanderthals do not forget that AT came together to defeat France, which was supposed to be the best military on the planet at that time. So definitely defeated Napoleon. So we hear about Napoleon, but we don't hear about the one who defeated Napoleon. So if that's your best military mind, then guess what? We got better. So defeated the French, which was the number one military, then defeated the British, which was the number two military, because the British tried to invade AT right after that, because one, they were thinking, all right, Jamaica's right there, that if this, comes, it could be like a brush fire across all of these. America as well was scared, whatever, of AT. So all these white folks, so British came in, they left with, at the lowest estimates, 10,000 soldiers dead, which was a huge thing. That, within a few years of them being defeated militarily, that's where they decided to abolish the quote-unquote slave trade, because they realized that every new ship that came from Africa was bringing in a new battalion that's going to whoop our behinds again, right? They're like, we're supplying their warriors for them. What are we doing? So they didn't have a problem with enslavement, period. They said, we just have a problem with the trade. You can keep enslavement going, but you can't bring in new Africans, right? Because they saw what happened when they did. So that's AT. And then they stopped, or let me say they transformed enslavement after Jamaica, the Samuel Sharp Rebellion, because again, they were getting their butts kicked, getting their butts whooped, getting killed. So it was out of fear that, guess what? If we don't do something different, let's call it prison.
Right.
If we don't do something different and call it something different, or call it 13th Amendment or whatever, the whole world is about to be 18. The whole world is about to be Jamaica.
See, that's the thing. When we talk today, I hate to bring up mainstream stuff, but it's like a lot of us don't know what we've already done.
Which is intentional.
Slaves were just, like no one ever fought back or anything like that. So.
People aren't fighting back now. If you compare then to now, then people aren't fighting back now.
Right.
Right? Because at that point in time,
they are. They're like, you couldn't enslave me. I'm moving like my granddad. I will shoot you or kill you. Right.
So this is the thing. What people do now is what they would do then. So if you're not killing paddy rollers now, that's patrollers, police officers. If you're not killing them now, you wouldn't have done it then. At that point in time, like I did another talk, you can write this down, the Africans who emancipated themselves. I did it for Emancipation Day a couple years ago. But I go through a good few hundred rebellions, revolutions, and uprisings all throughout the Western Hemisphere. And also bring in rebellions in the Eastern Hemisphere against the Arabs, right? The very first rebellion of enslaved Africans was the Zand Revolution, right, in the Arabian Peninsula. But we don't know about, those things. But the reason why the person who's saying that ignorant stuff is saying it is because African blood was spilled in order to, one, Haiti, to make them stop bringing new Africans, and then Jamaica to make them transform it at least.
Okay, so yes, we have to.
Yeah? Yeah. Oh, so the point I was driving at is, if you look at something like the Hyksos, this is what they call the Hekah Hitsu, right? So these were Eurasians who established a foothold in a place called Houtweret, what the Greeks refer to as Avaris. So this is in Kemet itself. So they came into the delta, which is, northeast Kemet, and they used that as a foothold to take over much of Kemet. So they came, humbly, quote unquote, but they ended up taking over much of Kemet as much as they were able to. And so I think about that even at the time that they are ultimately planning on doing a takeover, they have their folks who are there, and that's why Chancellor Williams goes into that any place that they came, all these Eurasians, Arabs, whites, whatever, that they would always have people there to act as a foothold so that they're able to eventually attack from inside and attack from outside, right? So boom, we'll question you all, the black people in the middle. So you would think that would be a viable strategy for like black people there. However, the fact that whites have unfettered access to black minds, it makes it very, very improbable, because it means that black children watch cartoons made by white folks. It means that they watch movies made by white folks. It means that their school curriculum is made by white folks. It means that to eat food, they're dependent on white folks. It means that they're working for white folks. That it will be very difficult to get the traction to have, because you can look at Philadelphia, the MOVE, organization, the bombing. These were black people who could have done what was necessary to ultimately do a similar thing. That if you're cut off from them, if you're not dependent on them, you just kind of live. And that's why they had a problem with MOVE, right? It's not that they were doing anything else. It's that if you, even Waco, right, Texas, these are white folks who are like, I'm cutting myself off from this. How much more us, right? So they're going to bulldoze, firebomb the whole block, several blocks, in order to prevent black people from congealing enough to now be a force internal to the U.S. that could now.
I see what you mean. So basically, they kind of like snake their way into everything, including your brain.
Right. Especially.
Well, repatriation sounds like. I mean, when I think about if I was having a family or whatever, it's an easier answer because it's nearly impossible to raise kids in that kind of environment, like, and keep them away from all of those things,
Because look at black children now. Right. School to prison pipeline.
I worked in a majority black school for 1 year, and it was just awful. Like, I'm like, you said.
By design.
They have no business even teaching black people.
Look up the Mohonk Conference. I don't know if you're familiar with that. MOHONK, which is where white men got together to decide what black miseducation was going to be all about. There were two that I know about. Well, look up the Mohonk Conference.
The other thing, everything that you're giving facts about is like, to me, it's obvious now that this stuff is very intentional. People think it's just happenstance. Like,
all of it is designed that Kambon says, this is what we're going to do. So, and all of it is documented because they do the documentation.
Right.
Right? I don't got to come up with nothing. Like, just read. Matter of fact, the interview my father was giving, he said he used to send articles to people, and people are like, are you in some type of secret organization? It's like, this is a newspaper.
Right.
This is a daily newspaper right here. He's just sending the information. It's like, this is readily available. But one, you have to know that you have enemies before you can start to think, what should I do about these enemies? Right? And the whole point of all those other things is so that you don't know that you have enemies. It's like the elk, and here are the wolves coming up.
Thank you for all of this. It's pretty clear now. I'll have to go back and read lots of things. But the other thing was that I was wondering about being here, though, the food thing. So, are you vegan?
Yeah. 9 months before I was born.
Okay. You're doing good then. Yeah. Well, so are there any restaurants here, or what do you do for food? You have, what did you say?
Yeah, there are quite a few vegan restaurants.
Oh, okay. I guess that's something I could have Googled, but I didn't think even to do that now. One of my friends from back home was saying that there was one near the airport. And oh, okay. Yeah, I saw that. Is it in? You still have it?
What?
The restaurant.
No, you said someone back home. I'm saying here, this place is home.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
That's stolen land.
Okay.
Here's home.
I see what you're saying.
But yeah, there are quite a few restaurants. There's one on campus, matter of fact, Evergreen Hotel. The one near airport is Pat's Vegetarian.
Oh, Pat. I might want to go there today. Cause you know what's funny?
Which is near City Center.
Sorry, I'm talking over you.
No, go ahead.
I was saying my team is cooking food from back home today. You know what we have though? Same type of. I'm like, when I think of food I want back home, this is what I want. What you're saying. But that's funny. Like I'm like I might have to skip out on that dinner and go over here.
No, so Pat isn't going to be working today.
Okay.
They do mainly lunch, so they start from like let's say 11:30 and go to let's say basically when the food runs out, but that's usually around 4 or 5.
Mhm.
So and that's Monday through Friday.
You said Evergreen.
Evergreen ITAL.
ITAL. Okay, yeah.
And they're open until I want to say 7:30, 8:30 today. And then I classify in Cross Central. They're open on Sundays but not Saturday. They're Hebrew Israelite.
Asa Sepa.
Yes, Sasafa. I'm translating to good earth or good land.
Okay. That's 3.
Yeah, that's right. There was another one called Vita International, but that's way out in Latavia, of course. I don't know if that's still in operation.
That's a good start, though. I can always ask around and look it up.
Yeah, so back in the 90s, if you said even vegetarian, people would be like, all right, what planet is vegetarian? Oh, I'm vegetarian. Oh, you're Martian? Like, hey. But, yeah, so now, and a lot of it is because, if you look at, in the 90s, you had the, flourishing of all these fast food joints. So now people are starting to get sick from the things that they were eating then. So now there's a health food store called Relish, where they make money hand over fist.
I heard about that one. I think it's a big building. Right?
It's in Osoya?
Yeah, we went past there. Shannon pointed it out to us.
Right. So now, because people were eating all that garbage before, now they're trying to do something about the garbage they were eating before. So now people are starting to eat healthy, trying to exercise and so on.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could predict it. I was like, yeah, I bet in a couple of years. Because, if you keep choosing death, ultimately it will take you to a logical conclusion.
Right. Okay. And then my other question was, I could ask a ton of questions, but as me being an educator, and my thing is, if I did even come over here, there's so many. Like I think of my children who I was teaching, like I just believe them. Like what do we do for the people, especially young people who still in that and have no choice to come over here and like here I am the teacher, I'm this agent and I'm required to teach them to death almost. Like so do you have anything to say about that?
What exactly are you asking me?
Well, I'm just saying, if you're a teacher in all of this, or you do anything, but teaching is one of those service jobs. You're trying to think you're doing good for the community, but it's like if the curriculum is not for their benefit, and it's like how do you not leave people behind? There's so many of us in that system.
Yeah, so for me, what I do as outreach, I have over 8,000 people on the site. The one I mentioned to you before, abbtoomey.com. I think I mentioned it to you.
Yeah, you did. I have a flyer somewhere in here.
Right, abbtoomey.com. I have videos, probably around 500 to 600 videos online. So all the stuff I'm telling you about, the course I mentioned, Foundations of African Thought, the African people who emancipated themselves. All of these are things that, are what I do, so people can make better decisions.
Good. Okay. So I'll look on there. And on there, do you touch on, I had asked you about Layla Africa and all those, like people who seem like they're for the struggle, but are...
kind of make up stuff as they go.
Yeah. Or like even a Tariq Nasheed, he was actually asking about having a social media site separate from Facebook, but then something happened and he never got it done or whatever. But it's like on the one hand he says a lot of things that you talk about, but then on the other hand says some other things that are just don't follow those people, right?
Yeah, this is the thing in the so-called conscious community. So when I was talking about before, whites who say one thing and do another, that's what Dr. Maremba Ani calls a rhetorical ethic. So your ethics don't stretch beyond your rhetoric of
Right.
just, let me say, all men are created equal. Meanwhile, I'm enslaving all these people and raping the salary hangings every night. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, that's the French. Liberty, equality, fraternity. The exact same white folks who said that during the French Revolution were the soldiers who went to Haiti to try to re-enslave those black people. Liberty,
rhetorical what?
rhetorical ethic.
Okay.
Meaning your ethics, your morals they stretch no further than, let me just say
What
these
you're
nice
talking
things,
about.
right?
Yeah.
So that's another example of it, liberté, égalité, fraternité. Now let's go enslave the black people again.
Right.
Another example would be like Marxism, right? This idea of, down with the state, it should be the peasant, so forth and so on. But then there's an article called Marx and Engels, Marx and Engels, White Racists, the proletarian outlook. And in Marxism they talk about proletarians, right? So it's spelled in this one prolet and then Aryan, Aryan, like Hitler, Aryan, whatever. But basically it goes into like all the letters and missives of Marx to Engels and to others, where he is talking about how this black man is a monkey and these people are this and whatever, that all this stuff that is racist, and this is a guy who we now are supposed to champion as, let's all be equal, let's all be on equal footing, let's share the wealth. No, that's not what he was actually about. So he's saying all these beautiful things, but then you can see the behavior. And the longer we're close to these pale white Eurasians, that is the main, there's a expression that I've heard sometimes, more is caught than is taught. More is caught than is taught. So they may teach you, it's like a parent who says, don't smoke.
Yeah.
Don't smoke now, baby. Don't do it. Do what I say. Don't know what I do. Right? So this is an example. So the longer you're close, so you're catching something. Someone is telling you they're trying to teach you something, but you're actually seeing what they're doing with their behavior, and that's where the actual learning takes place, is through the behavior. So I don't know, Tariq Nasheed, he had a documentary on 1804.
Yeah.
So I actually saw the documentary. I thought the documentary was quality information, interviewing all these different scholars. But, and I'm not in the U.S., so I don't know these people in terms of what they do, but when I hear reports of him, another guy, Umar Johnson, several of them, like people have come to me here to tell me about, not like specifically I'm coming just to tell you about, but like comes up like, these are some text messages that Umar Johnson sent to me saying such and such and such and such. Here is this, so I don't have much to go on other than, quote unquote hearsay, and I really don't follow it to that point.
Yeah.
But just in general what I can say, and actually we did the screening of 1804 here, and I know Professor James Small, who was interviewed in there. He actually came onto a BB Tumi to do the talk, but he connected me with Tariq Nasheed to get permission to show it, right? And he was like, yo, that's fine, whatever. It wasn't a long conversation or whatever, but that was my only interaction, with them. He was like, no, you don't have to pay fees. I just want the information to get out there. I said, okay. But again, just in general, I would say the longer you're close to Eurasians, the more you will behave in the rhetorical ethic, and that's what you see the conscious community, quote unquote, in the U.S. does. It's nothing but rhetorical ethic, because no matter what you say you are down for with African liberation or whatever you say, at the end of the day you're paying your mortgage. We know this. At the end of the day, you're paying your car note. At the end of the day, you're paying taxes. At the end of the day, if nothing else, you're eating food. At the end of the day, you're drinking water. At the end of the day, you're putting gas in your car. So no matter what you say that you're about, it is a fertile ground for rhetorical ethic.
Right.
Because no matter what you say you're about, what you do on it, you're working for white folk.
Right.
What you do on a day-to-day basis has to be opposite of anything that you say. Right.
Yeah.
So then that just continues on to the logical conclusion.
Yeah, it's like you
now
have your personality at home, and then you go to work, but you can't even really say anything
Right.
If you do, then
So I'm Albatale on weekends, but I'm Harry McGillicuddy every other day.
yeah.
Like, what is that? That's a schizophrenic thing. Now, there's a proverb in Chi that says, which is to say, when working on the side of the mountain, one person doesn't look at another person's buttocks.
Mm-hmm.
That's because everybody's buttocks are exposed. We're all on the slope, and everybody can see everybody else's butt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the type of culture or anti-culture that's there. That, all right, even though we talk this black stuff, we all know that we're working for white folks.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just not even mention that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm this, I'm that, but we know we're all paying our car notes. How do we drive here? You understand? So when I was there, and like in my family, we grew up with, like, I was, especially in Atlanta, you had Life's Essentials, which was a black grocery store. I'd drive past Kroger, I'd drive past whatever else, all these places, just to go to Life's Essentials, right? I would drive past wherever to go to, what's it, like, Everlasting Life and Soul Vegetarian and whatever. So in that space, you try, especially if you have the orientation I have, you try to support black people anywhere and everywhere possible. And there you think you're actually doing something. Here it's like the inverse. You have to like go out of your way if you want to support some, Lebanese or whites or whatever. So even when you think you're doing something, on a fundamental level, everything else that you're doing, that's a drop in the bucket compared to everything else you do on a day-to-day basis. At that time, I was already wearing nothing but African clothes, everything except drawers. Now I have drawers, right? So all of those things that you do, and nobody pulls anyone else's coat, because if they do it to you, then you do it to them. So I'm not going to even mention this contradiction that we all have, because I have the same contradiction.
Yeah, I know I do, especially with the clothes thing. Clothes and shoes, when I think about what my de-whiteness would look like, it would be right there, starting. So
yeah, that's economic warfare, because you're taking money out of the mouths of all these little white kids whose parents are operating on the welfare that you give them. So they talk about U.S. aid and all these other things. Anytime we buy white clothes, that's aid to white folks. That we're just giving to them to the tune of billions. I'm like, don't you think as black people we could build a space station with billions? But instead of doing that, we all just give it away freely because of creative tastes and desires. Right? Well, I want to look like this person who I saw in that commercial. Well, I want to have shoes like this model. In this music video. So they're very clear, and that's the point about access, unfettered access to black people, to black consciousness. And that's what you have over there. And that's the easiest way to do economic warfare. Like, that's on the fundamental level, just the clothes. I'm not even saying, let's build our own spaceships yet.
Right.
But you could repurpose some of those billions to start doing some other things.
It seems like
that.
It's so hard, though. We always talk about it. Don't shop at Target. Don't shop at Walmart. Don't go to the mall and buy Jordans. But then, I don't know. So I guess for the first thing is to just do that yourself.
And then even among, and that's a step, even among cave beasts or Neanderthals or whatever you want to call them, that there are degrees that you can look at. So for example, when I was looking for a laptop, there used to be a company that was here in Ghana, but it shut down because black people wouldn't support them. And they found every reason not to. White Man's Life is Cold is here as well. So that took away that option. So I was looking at, which companies are invested in the prison industrial complex, privatized prison, whatever. So HP, Dell, Compaq, HP and Compaq are related. All these different, Boeing, I looked at all these different companies so just like a list of all these companies, I said, okay, I'm not giving my money to any of those Neanderthals. So, I ended up with an Asus, right? Hong Kong.
That's good. One thing.
Right. Which is not the ideal, because with de-whitenization, you're trying to get to by us, for us, things that are made by us. So, but that's a step away from let me finance my direct enemy. So, I don't pat myself on the back for that, but it's just like you have to be conscientious and decide who am I going to support and who am I not going to
So
support.
where did you get that phone? Is that
At
readily
OSU.
available?
At OSU, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I looked it up online, so the distribution is out of OSU.
Okay.
And I had another phone, which was RLG. That's the company that I just mentioned that shut down. I had the laptops as well. So that one I had for like 2 or 3 years. It finally conked out. I think it got wet. And the screen started acting weird. If the phone gets wet, then stuff starts jumping and trying to touch the screen. But yeah, all of those are just making intentional decisions and waging economic warfare. Just on an individual level, so you can refer to it as economic guerrilla warfare against, white enemies. And take it from there to the next level. The money that you're not giving to your enemy is money that you can repurpose to African causes. Because all the money that we've donated to white folks, don't you think that could pave some of these roads around here? Yeah. Don't you think trillions of dollars? And just if we look at the frivolous stuff like how to do it to perm your hair, right? I need to get my hair straight like a dog or horse or any type of mammal other than a human being, which is an African. So just to do that, think about how many billions, if not trillions, go to them. So Korea is now making Samsung. Korea, I'm talking about South Korea, they're now making Hyundai and Kia and all these others. That a great deal of that money is the South Koreans who are in the black community in the U.S.
Yeah.
Because all that money, it doesn't stay in the U.S. They send that back to Korea. And then once all of that money from the black community, we built Samsung.
Right.
We built Kia. We built Hyundai. We built all these Korean companies on the backs of the self-hatred industry.
Yeah. So yeah, even when I think of why our businesses aren't successful and people give this generic answer, we have bad customer service with one another. But it's like, you don't say that when you stay going to the Koreans, they don't even smile and they tell you to get the out and stuff, so.
They'll shoot you.
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know what we're thinking.
Yeah, this is the thing. We're not thinking, we're reacting to stimuli. Just like Pavlov's dog, just like the Skinner rat, that there's no thinking going on there. It's that here, this is put in your environment, this is put in your environment. Your environment is shaped in order to create the desired response. The desired response may be the type of person who has bad customer service when they see somebody who they've been taught their entire life to hate, which is the same person they see in the mirror. So either I hate myself through the drugs or alcohol or the food or anything else, or I externalize the hate to someone who looks just like me. But then let the white police officer, oh yes, man, I'm right, hey, let me do that for you.
Yeah, that's one thing I do like about being here, though, is that I feel like the way I see people relate to each other is much more,
It's on the way, because whites are getting more and more access, so the behavior is becoming more and more anti-African. So you have more. I remember in the 90s, if there was an armed robbery, it was national news. Because it would be like, oh, that must be the Nigerians, right? Now, armed robberies all the time. The more access whites have to you, the more anti-African behavior will be displayed by African people. So, homosexuality is here now. Like, all the white stuff is here because people are looking at white movies.
Right.
They're looking at white TV shows. They're listening to white music. So, fundamentally, whiteness is anti-African, it's anti-black. So the more they have access to you, the more anti-African and anti-black you'll be in everything you do. Clothing, perming, skin bleaching is here. The self-hatred industry is here and it's in full effect. Praying to an imaginary white boy, you see that on the back of just about every photo. So a self-hatred industry is here, and it was implanted so that they can make money off of your demising processes more fundamentally.
Okay, and so that's like that's basically when we're having this conversation about why isn't Africa developing and things. Well, this is who we're traveling with. This is this book. Now, mind you, we've only gone through preface and haven't cracked this open, but in our conversations we keep talking about why isn't Africa like this and why isn't it like that. So when we talk about development, that question of well, what else is gained, like not good things, gained with so-called development. It's just basically the challenge of widenizing Africa or whatever. That's what development sounds like it is.
So development, that's social Darwinism, that's chain of being. So the question comes, develop from what into what?
Right.
Yeah. So, in cultural anthropology and undergrad, the teacher went through various concepts so that we could actually understand what unilineal evolution is all about. So unilineal evolution is the idea that evolution takes place like this on a line that's always going up. That's the Eurasian notion of progress and so forth and so on. So unilineal evolution is derived from, in the context of human beings, from social Darwinism, which is derived from Darwinism, which is derived from the divine chain of being. It's just different ways of saying the same thing. So divine chain of being is here as white God. Underneath that you have angel. Underneath that you have man. Underneath that you have white man. Sorry. Under that you have white woman. And then you have yellow man, yellow woman, red man, red woman. Keep going all the way down. Brown man, brown woman. Down the bottom, black man, and then black woman is as far down as you can get. And then beneath that, and that's only if they consider black people not to be part of flora and fauna. So it's only in the last 50 years that the indigenous black people of Australia stopped being classified as flora and fauna, meaning plants and animals.
Yeah.
So you could do whatever you want to because they're just plants and animals, right? Same thing you could do, pluck a flower. Same thing you could do, shoot a dog. That's what you can do to them. So, but assuming that they're going to put us in the human category, which they usually did not do, then underneath that you have birds, because birds are closer to this imaginary white god, so therefore they're higher up. And then they have fish, and then they have land mammals, and then it goes down to reptiles, so forth and so on, down to insects, and then it goes down to plants, then it goes to rocks, then it goes under the earth into the hell and devil and so forth and so on. Yeah, of course, yeah. So that's the divine chain of being. Now, what Darwin did is he took that belief-based thing, and then he made it into a so-called scientific-based thing, where he's saying that at the top, let's remove God, and then at the top, we'll just make it white man. And then underneath that, then you just keep going all the way down to black woman, right? And development along the lines of unilineal evolution is for the black woman to ultimately become a white man. Whoever is lower on the scale, they just go up one, all the way till they get to the highest point. So in Australia, I mentioned, trying to rape the people out of existence, that was part of the idea of helping them, either exterminating them off the face of the planet, or raping them out of existence so they eventually become white, right? So that's where ideas of development actually come from, right? So now when we talk about any type of development, it's still along the lines of unilineal evolution, that you're starting off as a pagan, savage, heathen, so forth, so on, whatever they called us, and now you become more and more like a white person. So you wear white folks' clothes, and now you perm your hair like white folks. So now you do all this. So the self-hatred industry is very much tied to development along the lines of unilineal evolution, social Darwinism, because the more white you are, quote unquote, the less of a savage you are. And that's also a survival mechanism because they use that as pretense to do whatever they wanted to do. We can take your land, we can cut off all your heads, we can blow all of y'all up, we can rape all of your women, we can kill all your children because y'all are savages. So what do I need to do to get you to stop doing that to me?
Right.
Right. So that's the artificial selection path of survival, whereas the natural selection path of survival is, no, we're not going to be dogs, we're human beings, and we're going to do something about these Neanderthals and what they are doing to us. Because that hasn't been very successful in various times, because they have black people fighting on their side against us, and usually the way of getting black people to fight on their side against us is by saying, guess what, you're saved, you're Christian, now kill off all these savage pagan heathens. Oh, guess what, you're, honorary Frenchman, so therefore, whatever. So when they were fighting against the indigenous people here, they would bring in military regiments from other British colonies who were already thoroughly, yes sir, boss, sir. So they brought in companies from Jamaica, from Sierra Leone, from Nigeria, in order to fight Asante.
Really?
Yeah. And that's regular. They'd always just ship in troops from one place in order to, because it's an empire, just get your lackeys to fight against whoever, and then just take them out one by one until there's nobody left, right? Because we don't understand we're all Kemetiu, we're all black people. And again, that's the same thing. Take us back to AP, take us back to Kemet. That if we actually understood we were all black people, then some of us would not be fighting against other black people on behalf of these pale white Eurasians.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the short version. But all this is in the course Foundations of African Thought. But that's a short version of development and what that's all about and the roots of where it's coming from. Because very rarely do they answer what are you supposed to be developing into, what were you before, and then what's the end game, what are you supposed to ultimately be.
Yeah, that's my question. I think I might ask that to the group. Because we were talking about, even down to a question came up about literacy rates. Oh, we went to a presentation at the U.S. Embassy. She was talking about literacy rates and for special education materials and stuff like that. And then my question was, well, what is it? Why is that something that's even on their list of things that they check into when they are looking at countries, like their literacy rate? And then, what is the end game for all of these people to then become literate?
It's the white man's burden. So you have two different, and this is in that book, The Cosmic Holocaust, too. You should read it. That you have two different approaches to the Kaiser's Holocaust, Germany's Forgotten Genocide. So I'm saying about before. That one was paternalistic, which is what this one is. It's the development oh, we have to make them stop being Africans, right, in all these different ways. The other one was just exterminate them. They're unfit, so let's just exterminate them. Now, what they have in common is all of them are white, right, the ones who are perpetuating it, and all of them want to survive. They just have different methods of going about it. Just like for us, we have different methods of going about it. Some are going to be sellout house Negroes, some are going to be revolutionaries, but we're all looking for how are we going to survive. So I say, let's just be a lapdog, and then they won't shoot us. So I'm saying that's not going to be a long-term solution. Look at the history of how that's worked everywhere else. I don't think that's going to ensure a survival in the long term. So yeah, that's on the white side. That what all whites fundamentally have in common, whether they're so-called liberal or mean or conservative or whatever, is all of them want to exist. Right? Now, I came to that. My father gave a talk on C-SPAN where he proposed a solution of what to ultimately do with all of these white folks. And what I got lots of email from that at that time, and what I came to understand is that it's some from black people. The black people say that's not moral, that's not right. But the whites, they never said that. They say you can't do it. You don't have the power to do that. All right, you come and get me then. I'll be waiting. Right? They're not saying you shouldn't do that. They're saying that that's just not feasible. You should, but it's not feasible. You can't. Right? So anyway, I came to the conclusion that the liberal ones did not want that solution to be implemented against them. The conservative ones did not want their children or they themselves to be part of that solution that my father proposed. That's what all of them have in common, even though they look like different things. Fundamentally, the core is all of them want to survive, and they just have different ways. One wants to hedge their bets. They're thinking, you know what, black people may come to power, so we need them to think that some of us are good, right? And some are like, no, they won't, because we got these nukes here. So, right, let's just go through it. So it's what Malcolm X used to talk about in terms of the wolf and the fox. So the wolf, you can understand where the wolf is coming from. He's very aggressive. The fox is very sly. Or just, kind of smile at you. Like, oh, that's so cute. But he wants to do the same thing that the wolf wants to do. Right? So ultimately, what all whites have in common, apart from the ones who have already committed suicide, but even to some degree, even them, because some are taking themselves out so the entire group can survive. It's like if you look at, I was looking at a documentary about these stinging ants in South America in the Amazon, that when they need to cross a river, they make an ant bridge. So the first ones who, connect their pincers to the one in front, on and on until there's like a good million of them that spans the entire river. But the first ones, they start getting washed away. So they're kind of like, the sacrifices so that ultimately the entire, colony can continue along its way. So even to some degree, the ones who commit suicide on an individual level, that they're still doing something to benefit that entire group. Unless the only way you can convince me that they don't want survivors is if one gets rid of all of them. I'm like, yeah, okay, that one was serious. But and that's what they're supposed to want to do. Any living entity is supposed to want to survive. The way that they go about surviving is at the expense of everybody else, according to all recorded history from the beginning of recorded history itself. The very first writing system was African people, and that's what we were writing about. Is look at how these Eurasians gave. They need to take military action. That's the autobiography of Winnie. That's the very first military document. Autobiography of Winnie, the very first military document. And even before there was writing, you had these palettes, right? Which is like artistic palettes that they would use, to apply the same thing that they do still in West Africa, like the Hausa and others, Fulani, that they take this white coal, they call it, and then they put it here, they put it there. So they have these palettes, and so what they're using is antimony is what it's called. It would sit here in the middle, and then around they would have these different artistic depictions. So on some of these artistic depictions, it would show the conflicts of these Eurasians coming in, bringing war. You understand? The Libyan palette is one of the oldest ones. The Hierakonpolis Tomb 100 So that one is probably this, a mural that's on the tomb. So you see all these depictions of warfare, so forth and so on. Libyan Power is the one that shows warfare with these pale white Eurasians. Then Gebel Sahaba, the oldest instance of warfare. So you have all these things, attestations of conflict right there in the Nile Valley, which is what causes people to say, you know what, squash all that, we're all black people at the end of the day. Because there were conflicts, black on black conflicts, but you can't do that in the presence. It's like, here you have an antelope headbutting another antelope, and I actually saw a video like this. They were headbutting, and then from off screen a cheetah comes. The cheetah didn't care about whatever beef they had.
Right.
Both of y'all are dinner.
Right.
Right?
So then, in coming over to Africa, I'm going back to that talk that lady gave about development. Coming here, it's not necessarily for us to bring all of our, because they're telling us, what we value from you guys in America is your curriculum and your professional development and stuff. So we're not bringing that necessarily.
Fulbright is white folks who are giving money, and they're giving money for you to be colonizers, for you to be spies, for you to be missionaries.
Yeah, because we got to document all this stuff.
I know you do. I know you do. So this is a very cheap spy. Imagine if, so you think about like spy movies. Imagine if you had these
spy.
Well, you don't necessarily want to be.
Right.
But, that's essentially what you are being paid to be, as a cheap spy. Because imagine a James Bond spy, you got to give them a Ferrari, a pen that can shoot, you got to do all this type of stuff.
And then everyone's staring at me.
And everybody's staring. But for this, I don't know. We can pay you just a couple $1,000. You go, you tell me the lay of the land, and that's what the first missionaries were there for. So they're there to tell, these people have beef with those people. This is where the river is. This is where the ford is. This is where the crossing is. This is that. So all those books from the 1800s, all of them are going to the center of empire. Now they know how to proceed, after the Berlin Conference. That's what they're there for. That's what they're sent there for. They are the vanguard of the enemy army. So that's what Fulbright is. They're paying you to be the vanguard of the enemy army. So now they want to establish a military base here, and I'm giving a talk on that tomorrow.
But we talked to the administrator of the, who he is? The administrator of the parliament. He's a professor at UG right now. His name is Dr. Evans.
No.
And he's saying, he read through the entire document. And they don't want a military base. And Dr. Ananobi was like, yeah, they do. He's like, no, I read through the entire thing.
And so he's the only one who can read.
Right. So he was saying that, basically, it's our job as Africans. Well, this is what his argument was, that basically no father is going to have his children be in harm's way. So that's how he said that they're not going to have a military base here. Basically, Ghana's not going to put its people in harm's way like that.
So, I was reading a book, The West and the Rest of Us by Chinwezu, where he talks about foreign investment and why the U.S. has been so big on foreign investment, is that once you have foreign investment, then that gives the excuse of military protection for that foreign investment. So they need to have investments all throughout the world, because now they can justify, to protect our people. So if you look at the U.S. Embassy, that thing is a fortress.
Yeah,
that's a multi-block fortress.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And it's doing what it's, so they basically already have what could be military base, but now this is a more overt one. So if you look at, and I've read through the entire document as well.
So it's open for anyone.
To laws.
So it's open for anyone to read. He was making it sound.
Yeah, it's open. It was a leaked document.
The
document was leaked by someone who was in Parliament. So then it spread out, on social media everywhere else. So I have a copy of the document as well.
Okay.
So, when you read the terms of the document, it is basically what it shows is that Ghanaians specifically, but African people in general, still do not understand who they're dealing with. So in the talk tomorrow, I'm going to deal with all of the treaties, agreements, and protocols that the U.S. has not honored or withdrawn from, so forth and so on. So you can look at modern times, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, whatever they say that they're going to do, and it comes from this idea that America has no permanent allies, only interests. Right, that's Henry Kissinger. Before that, you had this parliamentarian in the UK, Prime Minister in the UK, who said that nations have no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Right? So that's the UK. Now, before that, 1770s, no, 17, what is it? I want to say 1797, I think it is. This is George Washington's farewell address. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up so I can read it for it. But he says the same thing, that the U.S., America should not be beholden to any foreign interests, that they have their own personal, they have their own interests, so any allies that they have should not be permanent. So that's his farewell address, and that's what some people refer to as unilateralism, some refer to as isolationism, but basically the idea is that America should not be subjected to any world standards, should not be subjected to policies of any government, subservient to any government, that they should be free to pursue their interests as they decide. And so what Trump is doing is what George Washington told him to do, which is America first, boom, 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 boom. And what all these whites are doing, they just have different ways of going about it.
Yeah, well, the same thing that this political science professor was saying. It almost sounded like he was praising the United States, because he was saying, well, when Africans get together and I guess they're at their conferences, the British and the Americans are up late planning while everyone else is out shopping and sleeping, and that well, the United States is the way it is because it's doing risky business around the world.
It is the way it is because it had black people working for free to build the White House. Black people working for free built Congress. Black people working for free built the railroad. Black people working for free drained the swamps. It is what it is because of free labor, and that's why they still use free labor, just 1 million black people in the prisons. These people don't know anything of what they're talking about. However, this is the end result of an intentional process to make them the way that they are. Right?
Oh, you're talking about the person I was talking
Yeah, the person you're talking about.
Well, one of my elders from back home, he's Ghanaian, and that was like his final words to me when I got over here. He's like, be careful when you're listening to what they're saying, because they don't know what they're talking about. But now I understand what he's saying. In this conversation, I mean, he gave a very powerful lecture, but I guess he doesn't know. I was thinking of what to take pictures of to have in our file. You don't mind if I take a picture of my stuff?
Okay.
Is this the part here?
Is this the part? Yeah, where we are. So this is George Washington. He says, "It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them." So again, this is the thing of there are no permanent alliances, and he's saying you should not have any permanent alliances. You just have it reiterated in different ways.
Yeah, do they know this? Do people working with the United States know that? I guess they can take that position themselves.
What's that?
Of having no allies.
Yeah. That's probably the most famous thing that people know the U.S. for is that quote. That's our Lord Palmerston John Henry Temple, who said it after him, and this is in the 1800s. In international relations, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. That's UK version. And then Kissinger brings it home to America.
So like for countries like Iran and North Korea that have not, I guess, cooperated with the United States, but now you find that they are having these meetings, what does that mean?
That Eurasians pursue their own interests, and the ones you just mentioned are all Eurasians.
Oh, right.
And whatever problems that they have amongst each other, those never supersede the problems that all of them have with us as black people.